Well, good morning. We are just over 3 weeks away from the general election on November 8th. This morning, we're going to meet the candidates in the only open state legislative seat in Upper Michigan this year. It starts right now.
From TV6, this is the Ryan Report. Now, here's your host, Don Ryan.
Well, the 108th State House District includes Delta, Dickinson, and Menominee counties in south central Upper Michigan. For the past 6 years, this district has been represented by Republican Ed McBroom, who is vacating the seat because of term limits. The district has an interesting history. It's been represented by both Democrats and Republicans over the years, and winning candidates have come from Delta, Dickinson, and Menominee counties. Now, this year, the candidates who are seeking to represent the district are Democrat Scott Salella, who is retiring as Dickinson County Sheriff, and Republican Bo LaFave, who put his pursuit of a law degree on hold to enter the race. Both of the candidates gained experience in active primary election campaigns earlier this year. This morning, I'll be talking with each of these men so they can tell us why they believe they are best qualified to take on this responsibility. We'll also talk about the issues they believe are important in this race. I'll be back to start the conversation with Scott Salella in just 2 minutes. So our first guest this morning is Scott Salella. Welcome to the Ryan Report, Sheriff.
Thank you
Good
for
to have
having
you
me.
with us. Why did you decide, and you have close to a 30-year career going with the Dickinson County Sheriff's Department, why did you decide to step away from that and run for this state representative seat?
Right at the end of my term, I'll have a little over 30 years, all with the Dickinson County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
And I considered this 2 years ago, and I didn't feel that the discussing it with my wife and family wasn't the right time. Number one, I was elected to serve a 4-year term as sheriff, and we felt that I had an obligation to fulfill the 4 years.
Okay.
And as we discussed, if it, I still felt like I could make a difference and wanted to pursue the 108th in 2 years from that time, then I would consider it.
Okay.
And I still had the desire to. I feel that this district needs a strong voice, but it also needs a voice that can be flexible. You know, we have 3 representatives in the UP, the lower part of Lower Michigan, and I believe it's 2 counties in the UP represented
Right.
also. But for the most part, you have the 3 UP representatives and a state senator. And we need to work together to get things done for not only this district, but the UP as a whole. And I feel that the experience that I have, not only with 30 years of law enforcement, but I have a lot of other areas of experience. And I feel that I can be a strong voice when I need to be and stand firm on issues. But I also believe that you have to be able to be flexible. And cooperation is a huge part of what I'm going after.
What else in your experience are you going to draw on if you're elected to this position?
Well, a number of things. Not only, like I mentioned, the 30 years of law enforcement, but I also have 6+ years on the Iron Mountain Public School Board of Education. And I had to resign from the school board when I was elected sheriff because the Michigan Constitution states that sheriff shall hold only one elected office.
Okay.
So prior to me taking office in January of 2009, I had to resign from my position on the school board. So I have experience as far as school board, the issues that face not only administrators, but also staff, students, parents. I spent time on the board of directors of the Caring House, which is the local domestic violence shelter in Iron Mountain, and that's given me insight on some of the social issues there. My wife and I, foster parents, again, very aware of some of the issues facing young couples. You know, we took these kids into our home because a lot of times younger parents, for whatever reason, just may not have been ready to be a parent yet. And so we took care of their most prized possession until they could get their lives back on track, and if not, until a nice, suitable home was found for them. My time as sheriff also gave me experience working with budgets. Granted, I'm not talking about a $54 billion
Right.
budget like the state of Michigan, but when Dickinson County has approximately a $9 million budget, and I've been responsible for a third of it, I learn to separate needs and wants, and then be able to prioritize those needs. And a lot of time that had to be reprioritized, sometimes on a day-to-day basis. I've also spent the last 5 years on the board of directors of the Michigan Sheriff's Association, currently the secretary-treasurer for that organization. And I've been, the last 5 years, we meet with the legislators every spring, and it's nice. It's sort of unique for our organization because we're able to go in as our board, 5 or 6 members, and we meet one-on-one with the different representatives or senators, whether it's one that's in leadership or maybe they're a sponsor of a bill that we're interested in.
What do you think are the big issues in this campaign, or what are the big issues you want to take on if you get elected to this position?
I think one of the major issues is the public education and how we prepare our students. Not only, what we have to remember is not everyone that graduates from high school is going on to a four-year college. And I want to make sure, and it was a point when I was on the school board, that we had to look out for the kids also, that the ones going on to a 4-year college or possibly 2-year, but the ones that wanted to join the workforce out of high school, had an opportunity to join the workforce out of high school, and the technical, the trades. You know, I think we've lost sight that we need these, the building trades, we need the pipe fitters, we need the welders, we need the auto mechanics, we need the body shop technicians. And I feel we have to do a better job in promoting and making some of these trades available to the students that want to.
I know you've talked about improving the economy. I want to ask both you and your opponent, there is a project down in Menominee County called the Back 40 Project,
Yes.
which would create apparently up to 250 jobs, but there's some strong environmental opposition. Do you have a position on this?
I don't, the position I have on it right now is more of a wait and see through the permitting process.
Okay.
And once the permitting process is done, depending on where that goes, then you know, I'm going to have a stronger position on it. No matter which, if it does go through, I think it's very imperative that, yes, we have the jobs coming in, but we also have to make sure that we have strong oversight and to make sure that the environmental quality and our resources are protected also.
One of the other issues that's been on the agenda in Lansing is the dark store issue. Kind of thought that was taken care of. The House actually passed legislation.
Yes.
It may come back next year if it doesn't make it through this year. Do you have a position on that issue?
I do, because it has directly affected my office, you know, the county and my office. And these are loopholes that need to be closed. And we're talking actually 2 issues here. The way a property is evaluated and the square footage, how much per square footage it's taxed on, and also the deed restrictions. And a lot of times that when we talk about the dark store or the big box store issue, we lose sight of the deed restrictions that are placed on some of these. And you know, to me it's ridiculous where these companies will say we should only be taxed at this, because if we go out of business, nobody's going to be able to purchase this and open up another retail store. Well, the reason nobody's going to be able to open up another retail store is because of the deed restrictions that the owners put on it. You know?
We've only skimmed the surface, I know, but our time is just about up. Any final thoughts before we wrap up today's segment? Any final words you want to share with our audience?
No, I just will hope that going forward now, we're 3 weeks away, 3.5 weeks away. We're working hard. I'm trying to get out where my experience I feel would be a huge asset for our district.
Okay, thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.
I'll be back to meet the other opponent running in this year's campaign, Boulder Fave, after we take this break. Well, continuing our discussion on the 108th State House Representative race, the Republican candidate is Boulder Fave. Bo, welcome to the Ryan Report.
Thank you so much for having me.
Good to have you with us. Why did you decide, you're a young man, why did you decide that you want to be the next state representative from the 108th District?
Well, as you imagine, I actually get that question a lot.
Okay.
So I graduated from Kingsford High School and went off to Michigan State for 4 years, got my degree in international relations and political economy, and I always thought I wanted to be a lawyer. Okay. So I started at Wayne State Law School, but every summer and winter when I came back home to the Upper Peninsula on break, I'd have a list of friends I'd want to call and hang out with that I graduated from high school with. And every summer and every winter, I had to cross more names off that list. People that moved away because they couldn't get a job locally. So after 5 years of standing idly by and watching and hoping that things were going to get better up here, I decided I had to do something about it, and I decided to run for state representative to bring some common sense to Lansing and make sure we can keep some of the Upper Peninsula jobs up here.
Has there been any surprises for you as you've gotten involved in the process? You, of course, had to go through a primary race. Everything kind of what you expected?
Yeah, well, I never expected I'd knock on 6,000 doors.
Okay.
But that's really what catapulted me to victory in the primary, and so there's no reason to change something that seemed to work. So we just kind of pushed our game plan forward and went out and asked for support from people all over the area, and it's been a blessing, and I've loved talking to people in their homes.
One of your campaign slogans has been bring common sense to Lansing. What do you have in mind?
Well, there's a lot of things, that encompasses a lot of stuff. I think simplifying our tax code's a big issue. Simplifying regulations, cutting some government red tape. The biggest issue I think that faces the Upper Peninsula is kids fleeing after they leave high school because they can't get a job. So I think what we should do is have an internship program where high school students can get skills in jobs that are hiring right now. Welding, construction, automotive repair, computer information technology. Let's let them go to a local business of their own choosing and get those type of skills that we can't offer them in some of our high schools right now.
We're seeing kind of a return in that direction to people looking more toward those kinds of jobs. Is there more the state can do to make that happen?
Yeah, well, first of all, some schools have already implemented this internship program. Not because I told them to do it, but they realized on their own that that was the right thing to do for their students. Also, it's hard to fund a welding program. It's hard to fund an automotive repair program at some of these local high schools. So I think that it's necessary that we start training kids in skills that they can use right on the job right after high school. We focused on college preparatory ever since the Granholm administration, and I went to Michigan State. I loved my time. I always knew I had to go to college because I wanted to be a lawyer. But for a lot of us, high school might be the end of their education. Right. Now maybe you go to Beta Knott Community College, and that's a wonderful institution. I loved my time there. When I was in high school, I dual enrolled. But college isn't for everybody, and right out of high school isn't for everybody. Sometimes you might go back to it later. But if we can get them the skills they need to get a job at Marinette Marine or a Boss Snowplow, where they're hiring constantly, I think they might decide to stay local and raise their family here, because we all know there's nothing better. There's not a better place in the world to raise your family than the Upper Peninsula.
What are some of the other issues you see affecting economic development in this region and creating jobs?
Well, obviously education is a big important part of it, but also, like I mentioned earlier, it's the government red tape. It's all the rules and regulations you have to go through to start your business, to keep in compliance with laws. So as long as we can keep people safe and make sure that the food they're eating isn't going to hurt them, and that they can make sure they get out of a building during a fire, there are some rules we could bring back to make it a little bit easier.
One of the projects being considered, and I asked the same question of your opponent when we talk about economic development, there's a fairly large mining project being debated now in Menominee County, which it's estimated would create perhaps 250 jobs. Do you believe that's a good project, or do you have any reservations about it? Because obviously there are people who have environmental concerns.
Well, and absolutely, and of course I am very concerned about the economic but also environmental impact on it. I've hunted and fished and camped on the Menominee River my entire life. So the last thing we need is an environmental disaster to coincide with the economic disaster we already have. So let's make sure it's safe. Let's make sure that it's not going to cause a huge disaster. But Michigan has some of the strictest environmental regulations in the country, and particularly with mining. We're the most strong on making sure that the environment is not going to be burdened by it. I think we all agree that the Upper Peninsula is the most beautiful place on planet Earth. 100 years ago, we put mines and roads willy-nilly across the Upper Peninsula. We've survived that. Now, I'm not saying let's put a mine anywhere we think we could put one, but after 100 years of figuring out where things can go and how to do it appropriately, I think that if the engineers and the environmental impact people think that it's going to be all right, let's watch it. Congress's job and the House's job is to oversight. So let's make sure we keep an eye on it. But I think that 250 jobs would be a really good opportunity for people of Menominee County.
One of the issues they've been debating in Lansing for a couple of years and can't come to a solution is electric power. Obviously that affects economic development and more. Being driven in part by many plants being shut down by EPA rules regarding coal burning.
Yeah.
Do you have some thoughts on the electric power issue?
I think that if we're looking for a magic bullet, we're not going to find one. I like to say, and I believe wholeheartedly, that there's usually not one-size-fits-all solution that can fix everything. So we're going to need a multifaceted approach to this problem. I think it starts with Upper Peninsula generation. I think it also starts with making sure you can buy your power from wherever you want to get it from, whether that's Wisconsin Electric. There's a company out of Duluth we could get it from, but we can't right now. We should be able to get it from Canada and downstate. But also we need to make it so if you have your own electric power generation, whether it be wind or solar or what have you, you should be able to sell that to the grid. Now, there are things like microgrids and very complex solutions. But basically, what it all boils down to is we need to be connected with the rest of the country. We need to be able to buy our power where it's cheapest. And when we make power in the Upper Peninsula, we ought to be able to sell it to where somebody else needs it, whether that's Nashville, Tennessee, or Las Vegas, Nevada.
We're running out of time. Are there other issues that you feel are especially important in this campaign?
Well, I think divisiveness is really a big thing that we have going on. My focus has always been we can fix the problems that we have in the Upper Peninsula. Like I mentioned before, it's our kids fleeing because they can't get jobs. We lost 2% population in the last census. It's not because mom and dad aren't living to be a little bit older than their mom and dad did. It's because our kids don't think they can find jobs here. I think make sure we can explain to our kids that there's two paths out of high school, college preparatory and job prep. I think we focused a lot on college in the last 20 years, and I think we need to focus on getting students ready to compete in the workforce.
We have less than 30 seconds. Why do you feel you can be effective in a group of 110 state representatives in Lansing?
It's a very good question. So my degree was in international relations. Now it's pretty complex to explain it all, but basically what they taught us is to analyze both sides of an issue. Say there's two people fighting on something. You got to look at what they're doing and what they're saying. Usually what their ultimate goal is somewhere in between. When I go down to Lansing, I'm going to work well with everybody down there because I'm going to be able to figure out what they're not telling us, what their true motives are. So I'm going to be able to work with both sides of the aisle. And I think that as long as we have level heads that prevail in Lansing, we can do a heck of a job for the Upper Peninsula.
Okay. Thanks for coming in and sharing this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Back with more on the Ryan Report after we take this break. Well, this morning our focus has been on the 108th State House Representative race because, as I mentioned earlier, it's the only open seat among the UP districts. But there are other important legislative races in the Upper Peninsula. In the 109th district, incumbent Representative Democrat John Keevala is being challenged by Republican Kevin Pfister from Manistique. Keevala is seeking his third and final term in this year's election. There's a similar situation in the western UP. In the 110th district, incumbent Scott Dianda is opposed by Republican Gregory Markinen from Hancock. Dianda is also seeking his third and final term. There's also a race in the 107th district, which includes Chippewa and Mackinac counties, as well as Emmett and Sheboygan counties below the bridge. In that race, Republican Lee Chatfield is opposed by Democrat Phil Belfie. Chatfield is the incumbent and seeking his second term. And of course, there is another major legislative race in the 1st Congressional District, which includes all of the Upper Peninsula and 16 counties and part of Mason County in Lower Michigan. The candidates are Democrat Lon Johnson and Republican Jack Berkman. They're hoping to replace Republican Congressman Dan Benishek, who is retiring after 3 terms. Across the UP, there are also many county, city, school board, and township races going on, so you'll want to check out what's happening in your community. Remember, voting is important. And don't forget, while all the media attention is on the race for the White House, the people that serve us close to home can often have a bigger impact on our lives than those sitting in Washington. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Well, I hope our interviews this morning provided some insights into the 108th state representative race. Those of you who live in the district have a decision to make regarding who will represent you in Lansing. For the rest of us, even though we can't vote in this race, the outcome will be important because the winner will be part of the UP team, and we need legislators who can work together for this area. That's it for this Sunday. Hope you'll join us again next Sunday morning.